So I'm Richard Garriott. Some folks out there may know me, of course, as Lord British. I'm an executive producer with NC Soft, working on a game called Tabula Rasa. Well, I'm at the just the right age to have stumbled upon computer games about as early as anyone could. I actually began writing computer games in the middle 70s, before the advent of personal computers. In fact, my first games were on either punch cards or more commonly paper tape spools. The display, there were no video displays, it was all on teletypes. But if you go back to those earliest games, they were still very much like people might remember the Ultima series. They used alphanumerics for graphics, and asterisks for walls, spaces for corridors, dollar signs for treasure. And you would make a move by entering a command, and then you have to wait about 10 seconds for it to print out. But it would print out a little hallway display, very much like Ultima's. And then in 1980, when I first stumbled into the Apple II, I converted one of my little text-based games onto the 3D graphics that I could eke out of an Apple II, and sold my first commercial game, which was called Akalabeth. Well, that first game, Akalabeth, that I wrote in 1979 and published it nationally in 1980. It was the owner of the Computerland store where I was working as a salesman, who was looking at this game that I had, was showing in after hours to other employees, and he was the one that said, that game is better than any of the ones that we're selling here on the wall in the store. He said, you should publish that. And so I spent what I thought was a huge amount of money. It was $200 in Ziploc bags and Xerox cover sheets, and started selling them on the pegboard of the store, where in the same state-of-the-art packaging that everything else was, which was a Ziploc bag. One of those first few copies that I had handmade myself, selling on the store wall, found its way to one of the first national distributors called California Pacific, and they offered me a contract to distribute it nationally, put it in a bigger Ziploc bag, and sold about 30,000 copies at twice the price point I was selling them for. That 30,000 copies times $5 a unit, which was my royalties. You do that math, that was $150,000 for 6 weeks of after-school time for a high school senior. And so that's obviously what got me a kickstart into the industry that has I've been riding ever since. Well, I'm a big adventure, travel, and exploration nut. And I mean that in both the virtual sense as well as the reality sense. And those two worlds for me collide all the time. If you look at the things I do when I'm not on the computer, I do extensive adventure and exploration travel. I've been down to the Titanic and the South Pole twice, and hunting meteorites and treasure wrecks and all kinds of things is kind of what I do for fun. And similarly, when I create virtual worlds, I'm creating that same sense of fun, but pushing it even farther than you can do so in the real world. And so the sense of creating an entire new world, an entire new place to explore, frankly, not only for the consumers, but for me too, is a big part of what drives me. Making a successful game, of course, is extremely difficult to define, especially in that it's really a combination of factors, in the sense of there are certain things that I think a successful game must have, like it must have competitive graphics as a case study and competitive sound, and that's just to get people to bother to take a look. And if you don't have that, you just can't get over the hurdle of getting it exposed to a broad audience. But even having that, then you have to fall down to really the meat of what makes a great game, which is always gameplay. And the combination of game mechanics, which are easy to understand and easy to get into, combined with a level of depth and sophistication that has a long-term draw, is very commonly, that combination of easy to play, hard to master, is commonly described in this industry, and I believe it's true. But the magic of finding a formula like that, or refining a formula like that, I think is very difficult. I've seen a lot of games fail. Of course, lots of them are just bad games, but even some really good ideas fail. And I think that when a great idea fails, there's occasions that there's some great ideas that are what I'll call ahead of the time, and the publisher's not quite ready for them yet. In fact, a good example of that is some games that do phenomenally well in Asia that don't do so well over here, or games that do phenomenally well over here that don't do very well in Asia. They're both great games. They're just not timed right for the preparedness of the local culture. But I think more commonly when a great game fails, it fails because it wasn't what I'll call finished correctly. There are tons of great ideas being put together by great, competent developers who run out of money or time in one way or another, and are therefore versus refine their great idea to the extent that it will be demanded or required to really be accepted by the public, and instead they ship it kind of with too many rough edges, and people either don't get it or can't get past those rough edges into the qualities that it does have. One of the things that frustrates me about how the evolution of the best-selling games has transpired is caused by its own success. And what I mean is that technology advances so rapidly that games never get to the level of depth that I believe that I would like to see them be developed and played. And I'm particularly a depth-oriented guy as a developer and a player myself. But here's the cycle I'll describe. If you look back at the simplest early games, they tended to be maze, go hunt treasure in a maze. However, like on the Apple II, once there's a good run around and hunt treasure in a maze game, to compete with that game, you need to do something with more depth. And so the games in general get more and more depth over time, until there's a technological breakthrough that allows the computer to do much more bells and whistles and gloss on the presentation of that gameplay, and then suddenly a very simple gameplay game becomes compelling again because it looks so much better than the previous games. And so then we reset to that very simple, what I'll call first-person shooter style gameplay. But then to compete with that, they begin to get deeper and deeper and deeper. But then we have 3D hardware that comes into existence, and so everything resets. And so that constant reset, which is really the advance of technology, in total is great for gaming in the sense of it really does make them higher and higher quality and more beautiful and better gameplay. But they tend to remain shallow. The advice I would give to an aspiring game designer has changed radically over time. It used to be when I was fresh out of high school, I would go in the 80s, I would go back to my high school classes and go, wow, guys, the kids, it's going to be so easy. All you got to do is get your parents to get a computer and, hack around on it, to get some magazines, type in some programs, and, ta-da, you're going to make millions of dollars. And in fact, to a large degree, that was true back in the day. And then there was a middle era where we used to say things like, the majority of our employees weren't, for example, college educated. In fact, there weren't schools you could go to get education in this field until quite recently. But now the situation has changed radically. Now the number of people who would like to become members of the game development industry are extensive. Yet we're still a very hit-based business, and so only the top few games actually make money. The rest go out of business. And so therefore, to succeed at that, you really have to be aligned with a top developer. And the top developers, of course, can only manage to hire the top people in order to sustain that top position. And so if you want to succeed in the games business now, it means not only do you need to go to college, not only do you need a degree in this business, but then you've got to figure out a way to go through the School of Hard Knocks to learn the actual craft on the job with someone who's willing to employ you, and that you're not going to drag their project down while you learn what you need to really be a competent participant in a top-flight game. Well, for me, the Lord of the Rings is easily the most influential story in my career, combined with a game being Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, for me in high school, my sophomore year in high school was clearly a pivotal moment. Where in the same, approximately a month, my sister-in-law gave me a copy of The Lord of the Rings, some friends of mine introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons, and I happened to bump into an Apple II computer for the first time. And immediately, all three of those things kind of linked up and became a deep passion of mine. From what I call a computer gaming professional sense, I don't think I'll ever be done, in the sense of, as this evolves, I still want to continue to provide the, what I'll call the ultimate virtual reality experience. And what I mean by that is not just eventually goggles and VR equipment hardware-wise, but also to create a reality that is not only real, but compelling to participate in, that is incredibly real. But I think that that's unfortunately quite far off. So I'm a big VR enthusiast, but also a big skeptic in the sense of, I don't see any of that technology coming to fruition anytime soon, frankly. On a more personal note, though, too, in addition to the computer game activity, as I've mentioned, I'm a big, adventure and exploration nut. My father was an astronaut, and so I'm working hard to get myself into space. Interestingly, I actually own many of these kinds of companies. If you've heard of the X Prize, I'm one of the founders of the X Prize, and there's a company called Space Adventures. I'm the largest shareholder of Space Adventures, and we've put people on the International Space Station now every year for the last 5 years, and so that's my company. But yeah, even the suborbital stuff, we're building spaceports now around the globe, and Virgin actually is a competitor of ours. But no matter who wins, I'm sure I'll get to go here in the next 5 or 10 years. If I had to pick another career, it would definitely be something like cosmology, physics. Something I've been actually doing as a hobby, along with my dad, is extremophile research, which is life forms that live in extreme environments like Antarctica or hydrothermal vents, things of that nature. Finance. which is why I'm so lucky to have my brother Robert as my business partner. Most everybody I know who's in a creative business, there's lots of creative businesses where you end up managing yourself, and I find the best creative people are often the worst financial managers, and that's much to the downfall of a lot of creative people. I've been, again, very lucky to have my extremely fiscally conservative brother as my business partner, who's kept our companies afloat and in the black and growing in spite of the random behavior of us creative types. From an admiration standpoint, I've been over time, a big fan of, say, Sting as a musician, just in the sense of the diversity of work he's done down through the years. If you think of the painting and things, Da Vinci is big in my book because of the combination of art and science. And then more recently, a guy who's one of my big hero is a magician, a guy named Robert Houdin, who is kind of the father of modern black tie oriented versus street magicians, who is also a scientist and inventor. But about 12 years ago, I discovered a local boxing gym where I have been going regularly now for 3 times a week for the last 12 years, and have been now traveling the world following a good friend of mine who, when I met him 12 years ago, was an aspiring boxer. He's now worked all the way up to becoming world champion. He's actually been world champion twice. And in fact, I was out at a fight with him last week. So I've become not only a big boxing fan, but sort of a sports photographer through my rise alongside my friend. Around the boxing gym, I hear plenty of Spanish swear words, but yeah, I don't want to offend my Hispanic friends back south by repeating it here. So things about your mother that might come to mind in Spanish, and things you might do with your mother. Inappropriate behavior. I don't even know what my blood type is. That's I've known off and on through the years, and I actually have blood drawn with some regularity due to my bizarre adventure travel, but I don't remember what it is. I actually don't listen to non-game music while I'm either creating or playing games. I'm a silence or listen to the game itself oriented person even while I'm coding or designing. I get distracted too much, I think, by I get into the music versus stay focused on the production. For me, I find a game every year or two that's not my own or one of our own games that I like. But it's honestly quite rarely. It's about once every 2 years. So I can name all the games I've played extensively that weren't games I've worked on, on a couple of hands, like right here. So I can tell you that truly the first game I ever played to completion that wasn't a game that I wrote was Myst. Since then, the only games I've played extensively are, I'll get most of them here in this one recitation. It's things like Medal of Honor, Battlefield 1942, American McGee's Alice. Played a lot of World of Warcraft about a year ago. That's about it. Command and Conquer. I was a big fan of Command and Conquer, and to a lesser degree, Warcraft. Between the RTS that I really liked was Command and Conquer. And today, the last 12 months, I really haven't found one that has been one that I played.